When the poor girl sat at his table by mistake, the cold CEO faced the secret he buried for years. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Emily had always believed that the world worked in simple terms. Those with wealth were separate from those who struggled, and nothing would ever blur that line. She worked tirelessly at a local diner in New York, where every shift felt like an eternity, yet her dream remained the same: to escape the constant grind and have a life that didn't involve scraping by. But one evening, something unexpected happened that would change everything. As the restaurant buzzed with the usual chatter, Emily accidentally found herself in the wrong seat at the wrong table. Without realizing it, she sat down at the most expensive table in the restaurant, a table reserved for none other than Jackson Knight, the CEO of Knight Enterprises, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the city. Emily glanced up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the man standing in front of her, his icy blue eyes piercing right through her. Jackson Knight was known for his cold demeanor, his business acumen, and the walls he had built around himself. He wasn't the type of man to tolerate mistakes, especially not from someone like her. "Excuse me." Jackson's voice was low and commanding, cutting through the noise of the restaurant. Emily felt her face flush with embarrassment as she stood quickly, apologizing profusely. But something in Jackson's gaze stopped her. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of recognition, a hesitation, as if he knew her from somewhere. Emily couldn't put her finger on it, but she felt it. Jackson's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he gestured for her to sit back down, much to her surprise. "You seem lost," Jackson said, his voice still firm but softer now, as he took the seat across from her. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but he raised his hand. "Let's talk. You clearly don't belong in this world, so tell me, what's your story?" The question hung in the air, and Emily hesitated, unsure whether she should answer honestly or try to escape the awkward situation. But the way Jackson was looking at her, it wasn't cold or dismissive like she expected. There was curiosity, even intrigue, hidden behind the facade of a man who had learned long ago to keep his emotions locked away. Emily took a deep breath and began to tell him about her life. She spoke of her struggles, her dreams of something better, and the life she had always known. Jackson listened, his expression unreadable, but his eyes never left her face. As she spoke, Emily felt an odd sense of comfort, as though she could speak her truth without fear of judgment. But little did she know, this conversation would open the door to a secret Jackson had buried deep within himself, a secret that had been haunting him for years, and one that Emily, without even knowing it, was about to uncover. Jackson leaned back in his chair, studying Emily with a new intensity. Her words, raw and unfiltered, seemed to resonate with something deep within him. There was a quiet moment, an unspoken understanding that hung between them, like the calm before a storm. Emily, who had always seen the world through a lens of struggle and survival, was now sitting across from one of the most powerful men in New York. Yet, instead of feeling out of place, she felt strangely at ease. Perhaps it was the sincerity in Jackson's gaze, or perhaps it was the fact that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't being judged for her past. Jackson, on the other hand, was wrestling with an unfamiliar emotion. The way Emily spoke about her life, the hardships, the dreams, reminded him of someone from his past. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he was certain there was a connection. A part of him didn't want to acknowledge it. After all, he had worked so hard to bury that part of his life. But Emily's story stirred something he thought was long gone. "So, what's next for you?" Jackson asked, his voice breaking the silence. Emily's eyes flickered toward the window, watching the hustle and bustle of the city below. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I've been saving every penny, trying to make a better life for myself. But it's hard, you know? It feels like I'm always stuck in the same place." Jackson nodded, his mind racing. He had been in her position once, many years ago. He had worked tirelessly, clawed his way to the top, and in doing so, he had lost a part of himself, part of his soul. He was now a man who had everything, but had given up everything in the process. Emily's words were a stark reminder of what he had sacrificed. For the first time, he wondered if it had all been worth it. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, aware that Jackson's silence was far from the cold, indifferent silence she had expected. There was something different about him, something more human. "You've been through a lot," he said quietly, almost as if to himself. "But you're still here, still fighting." Emily shrugged, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of her napkin. "I don't have much choice," she replied with a slight chuckle, though her eyes betrayed a deep sadness. "Sometimes, it feels like life doesn't care about you. Like no matter how hard you try, it's never enough." Jackson felt a pang in his chest at her words. He understood that feeling all too well. For years, he had felt the same way. Like no matter how much he achieved, it never filled the emptiness inside him. He had buried that emptiness under layers of wealth, power, and control, but it was still there, lurking beneath the surface. "I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for," Jackson said, his voice soft but firm. "You've made it this far, and that's something to be proud of." Emily looked at him, surprised by his words. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Her entire life had been about survival, about getting by, and here was this man, someone she had no business talking to, telling her that she was strong. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it, even if just for a moment. There was a long pause before Emily finally broke the silence. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on her. He didn't know why he cared. He didn't know why he felt this strange connection to her, why her story had affected him so deeply. All he knew was that he couldn't let this moment slip away without finding out more. "Maybe because I see a part of myself in you," he said finally. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily looked at him, her mind racing. She didn't know what to make of his words. Was it pity, compassion, or something more? But before she could ask, Jackson stood up abruptly, the shift in his posture signaling the end of their conversation. "I have to go," he said, his voice suddenly colder, more distant. Emily nodded, feeling the familiar walls go up around him. It was as if the moment they shared had never happened. But as Jackson turned to leave, something inside him stirred, a realization that this encounter, this seemingly insignificant moment, had changed something deep within him. He didn't know what it was yet, but he knew that Emily had somehow uncovered a part of him he thought was long buried. The next few days passed in a blur for Emily. She couldn't shake the encounter with Jackson Knight from her mind. There was something about him, something that made her question everything she thought she knew about people like him. Jackson had always been the type of person who thrived on control. He had built his empire from the ground up, one calculated move after another, and he had never let his guard down. But there was something about Emily that made him do the unthinkable, let her see a glimpse of the person he used to be, the man he had buried beneath the weight of his success. He couldn't stop thinking about her either. The way she spoke, so honest and raw, had unearthed emotions in him he had long since buried. He had become so used to his cold, detached persona that he had forgotten what it was like to truly connect with someone. And yet, with Emily, he felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. It was almost like a whisper from his past, a reminder of the person he had once been before ambition consumed him. The days went on, and Emily continued with her life. She went back to her job at the diner, serving tables and trying to keep her head above water. But she couldn't escape the feeling that something had shifted, both within her and in the world around her. She started noticing things she hadn't before, the way people looked at her, the way she carried herself, as if something inside her had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. The more she thought about Jackson, the more she realized that there was something different about him. He wasn't just a rich CEO with a cold heart. There was a depth to him that no one ever saw. He had a history, a past, that he was hiding, just like her. Emily didn't know what to make of it. She had never been the type of person to get involved with someone like Jackson, someone who was so far removed from her world. But there was something about their brief encounter that had left a lasting impression. It wasn't just the way he looked at her. It was the way he made her feel like she mattered, like her story was worth hearing. One evening, as Emily was walking home from work, she spotted Jackson across the street. He was standing outside a fancy restaurant, talking to a group of business associates. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. The last thing she wanted was to make a scene, but a part of her felt compelled to go over to him. She didn't even know why. Maybe it was the curiosity that still lingered in her mind, or maybe it was the small, nagging feeling that she wasn't supposed to leave things unfinished. As if on instinct, Emily crossed the street and walked toward him. Jackson noticed her before anyone else did. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a split second, she saw something in his eyes, something warm, something that had been buried beneath layers of ice for so long. He excused himself from the group and made his way over to her. "Emily," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "I didn't expect to see you here." Emily shrugged, her heart pounding in her chest. "I was just passing by," she said, trying to sound casual. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Jackson smiled, a rare, genuine smile that caught Emily off guard. "You're not interrupting," he said. "Actually, I'm glad you're here." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just stood there, a world apart from the people around them, as if the rest of the world had faded away. Finally, Jackson broke the silence. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," he said, his tone thoughtful. "And I've realized something. I want to know more about you, Emily. More than just what you've told me. I want to understand your story." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. She had never expected Jackson to say something like that. She had never expected him to care enough to want to know more about her life. For a moment, she was speechless. She didn't know what to say or how to respond. But then she realized that for once, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid to let him see her, to let him into her world. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. It was a few days later when Emily found herself walking through the streets of Manhattan once again, the city's chaotic energy pulsating all around her. The skyscrapers loomed over her, casting long shadows as the sun began to set. She had always felt small here, surrounded by wealth and ambition. But today, something felt different. It was as if the world around her had shifted in ways she couldn't explain. Her encounter with Jackson still lingered in her mind, like a faint echo she couldn't shake. The way he had looked at her, the way he had seemed so much more than just a cold, distant CO, it had all left a mark on her. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him, despite knowing how dangerous it could be to get involved with someone like him. Yet, deep down, she felt a sense of curiosity about the man behind the sharp suits and icy exterior. She had always believed that people like Jackson, people with money and power, were untouchable, that they lived in a different world altogether. But there was something about him that made her question that belief. It was that warmth she had seen in his eyes, that rare moment when he let down his guard, even just for a second. As she walked through the city, Emily's thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of her phone. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was from Jackson. "I hope this isn't too forward, but I've been thinking about our conversation. Would you like to meet again? I'd like to continue where we left off." Emily stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how to respond. It had been a few days since they last spoke, and she had thought about him often. But was this just a fleeting moment for him? Or was there more to it? Hesitantly, she typed a response. "I'd like that." Almost immediately, Jackson replied, "Great. How about tomorrow evening? Dinner at 7? I'll make sure it's a place you'll like." Emily couldn't help but smile at the thought. There was something about his confidence, the way he seemed to take charge of every situation, that intrigued her. She agreed, setting the details in motion. The next evening, Emily found herself standing outside a stylish restaurant in the heart of the city, the bright lights illuminating the street. She was nervous, but there was an undeniable excitement bubbling up inside her. This was different from any date she had ever been on. This wasn't some casual coffee or drinks. This was with Jackson Knight, a man who was worlds apart from her. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The host greeted her and escorted her to a private table in the corner of the restaurant. Jackson was already there, looking as commanding and composed as ever. But when he saw her, his expression softened, and for a brief moment, it was as though the entire room faded away. He stood to greet her, his hand extending toward her in a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "Emily," he said, his voice warm, almost like a comfort. "I'm glad you came." She smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. As they sat down, the conversation flowed easily between them. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just two people talking, sharing, and discovering more about each other with every passing minute. Emily learned more about Jackson than she ever thought she would. He spoke about his childhood, the sacrifices he had made, and the loneliness that often came with being at the top. He was a man of many layers, and with each word, Emily could see more of him, more than the cold CO who had once seemed so untouchable. Jackson, too, was learning about Emily. He was surprised by how open she was, how her genuine nature came through even in the most casual moments. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was simply being herself. As the evening wore on, the two of them grew more comfortable with each other. The walls between them slowly began to crumble, and a connection that neither of them had expected started to take root. The night ended with a promise from Jackson. "I'd like to see you again, Emily," he said, his tone sincere. "This isn't just about curiosity. I want to get to know you better, if you're willing." Emily looked at him, her heart fluttering in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. It had been a week since Emily and Jackson's last meeting, and as she walked through the busy streets of New York, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation building inside her. Their dinner had been everything she hadn't expected. It wasn't just a simple date. It had been a genuine connection, one that had left her with questions she couldn't easily answer. She found herself thinking about him constantly, about the way his eyes had softened when he spoke to her, how vulnerable he had seemed when he shared pieces of his past. For a man who had everything, he had shown her something deeper, something real. Jackson had kept his promise and reached out to her the next day. Their conversations had continued, and slowly, they began to open up to each other more and more. Emily shared more of her life, her struggles, her dreams, and Jackson, in return, revealed parts of himself that he had never shared with anyone. The more they spoke, the more Emily felt like she was learning about a side of him that the world never saw. But there was something lingering in the back of her mind, something that told her this connection wasn't as simple as it seemed. Was it just her own curiosity about him, or was there more to this than just a passing attraction? As much as she tried to push these thoughts away, they kept coming back, like an unanswered question she couldn't avoid. She couldn't deny that she felt drawn to him in ways she hadn't felt before. Yet, she still questioned whether she truly belonged in his world. She wasn't one of the elite, the powerful, the people who seemed to have everything handed to them. She was a girl from the other side of the tracks, someone who had always fought for everything she had. Could someone like her really have a place in his life? The following week, Jackson invited her to a private event at one of the most exclusive art galleries in the city. It was the kind of place Emily would never have dreamed of stepping foot in, but there was no hesitation in her response. She said yes. The day of the event arrived, and Emily found herself standing outside the gallery, dressed in an elegant black dress she had borrowed from a friend. Her heart raced as she walked inside, the scent of fine wine and the sound of quiet conversation surrounding her. She was out of her element, but there was something comforting in the way Jackson had reassured her. "Just be yourself," he had said. "That's the person I want to know." As soon as she stepped into the gallery, Jackson spotted her. He was standing by the entrance, talking to a group of well-dressed people, but the moment his eyes met hers, everything else seemed to fade away. He excused himself and walked toward her with a smile that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. "Emily," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "You look stunning." She smiled, trying to hide her nerves. "Thank you, Jackson." They moved through the gallery together, Jackson introducing her to people she could never have imagined meeting. But it wasn't the people that kept her attention, it was Jackson. He had a way of making her feel seen, of making her feel like she mattered. As the evening wore on, Emily began to relax, and the doubts that had once clouded her mind started to fade. She realized that this connection, whatever it was, wasn't about wealth or status. It was about two people finding something real in each other, something beyond the surface. Jackson seemed to sense the shift in her. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said softly, as they stood before a large painting that caught both of their attention. "I've been thinking a lot about what this could be, what we could be." Emily turned to face him, her heart beating faster at the intensity in his voice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson hesitated for a moment, his gaze never leaving hers. "I think I've been running from something for a long time," he said, his words almost like a confession. "And you're the first person who's made me want to stop." Emily's breath caught in her throat as his words sank in. She had never imagined Jackson, the powerful CEO, would reveal something so vulnerable. The moment hung in the air between them, charged with an emotion neither of them had expected. The evening came to a close, and as they walked out of the gallery, Jackson turned to her. "I don't know what this is, Emily, but I don't want to let it go. I want to see where it takes us." Emily's heart swelled as she looked at him. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real, something they both needed. As they walked into the night, hand in hand, the city lights seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the world itself was giving them a chance to explore what lay ahead. Emily had always believed that the world of the wealthy, the world Jackson inhabited, was a place where she could never truly belong. But as the days passed since their night at the gallery, she couldn't shake the growing feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. The connection between her and Jackson was undeniable, yet there was still a lingering uncertainty in the back of her mind. Could someone like her, someone who had always fought for everything, ever truly fit into his world? Jackson, on the other hand, seemed as confident as ever, but there were moments, fleeting glances, quiet moments in their conversations, when she saw something else in him. A vulnerability that he had never shown to anyone before. He wasn't just the cold, calculating CEO that everyone knew him to be. There was more to him, layers of complexity that he had carefully hidden away. They had spent more time together over the past week, sharing dinners, walks in the park, and late-night conversations. Each time, Emily found herself drawn to him even more. She wasn't sure what it was, his intelligence, his charm, or the way he made her feel like she was the most important person in the room. But the more time they spent together, the more she realized that this connection was real, something deeper than just a fleeting attraction. It was as if they were two pieces of a puzzle, slowly fitting together despite the odds stacked against them. One evening, Jackson invited her to a quiet dinner at his apartment. It wasn't extravagant, just the two of them, sharing a meal that Jackson had personally prepared. Emily was surprised. It was nothing like the lavish dinners at high-end restaurants or the events they'd attended. This was intimate, personal. It was a side of Jackson she hadn't seen before. As they sat across from each other, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating the room, Jackson spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "And I realize that I don't want to keep running from things. I don't want to hide anymore." Emily looked at him, her heart beating faster as she listened. There was a rawness in his words, a sincerity that made her feel even more connected to him. "What are you running from, Jackson?" she asked softly. Jackson paused for a moment, his gaze drifting to the floor before meeting her eyes again. "I've spent so many years focusing on my career, on building this empire, that I've neglected the things that matter most. The people, the connections, the parts of myself that I buried along the way." His words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. She understood what he meant. She had spent so many years focused on surviving, on making it through the next day, that she had never really allowed herself to think about what truly mattered to her. "You don't have to keep running, Jackson," Emily said softly. "You don't have to hide who you are." The words felt natural, as if they had been building inside her, waiting for the right moment. Jackson looked at her, his eyes softening. "I don't want to hide anymore," he repeated. "Not from you." It was in that moment that Emily realized how far they had come since that first encounter at the restaurant. What had started as a chance meeting, an accidental moment, had blossomed into something more, something real. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, the way he spoke, the way he seemed to trust her in a way he hadn't trusted anyone in a long time. The evening passed in a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. There was no need for words. The connection between them was enough. As the night drew to a close, Jackson walked her to the door. "Thank you for tonight," Emily said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I needed this." Jackson smiled, his hand gently resting on hers. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice soft. "I think we both needed it." Emily stepped out into the night, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. As she walked back to her apartment, she couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short time. She had gone from doubting everything about her place in Jackson's world to realizing that maybe she didn't need to fit in at all. Maybe the world they shared didn't have to be the one everyone else expected. Maybe it could be their own, shaped by their own rules. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The days following their quiet dinner felt like a new chapter for Emily. What had once seemed impossible, the idea of truly being with someone like Jackson, now felt possible, even natural. She had always been the kind of person who kept her distance from people with too much power, too much wealth, because she never thought she could fit into their world. But Jackson had shown her something different. He had made her feel seen, like she mattered not because of her background or what she could offer, but simply for who she was. Their connection was undeniable, and as the days went by, Emily found herself thinking about him more and more. She had never been one to rely on anyone, not in the way she relied on Jackson. But with him, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. One afternoon, as Emily was walking through Central Park, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find a message from Jackson. "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk to you about something important." Her heart skipped a beat. She knew Jackson had been busy with work, and they hadn't seen each other for a few days. The thought that he wanted to talk to her about something important made her nervous, but in a good way. She quickly responded, agreeing to meet him at his apartment later that evening. When she arrived, Jackson greeted her with a warm smile, his usual calm demeanor giving her a sense of reassurance. But there was something in his eyes that made her wonder what was on his mind. They sat down on the couch, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the lamps around them. Jackson took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about where this is going," he began. Emily's heart raced. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was certain that whatever he had to say was going to change things. "I don't want to rush into anything, but I can't ignore how I feel," he continued. "You've come into my life and made me realize how much I've been missing. I've spent so much time building my career, keeping people at arm's length, that I never allowed myself to truly connect with anyone. But with you, Emily, I feel something real, something I didn't expect." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest as she listened to his words. She had known from the moment they met that there was something special about him, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. She had always believed that people like Jackson, people with so much power and control, were untouchable, unreachable. But he wasn't like that. He was human, just like her. And she realized in that moment that she wasn't afraid of what could come next. Jackson reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I want to be with you, Emily. Not just because I'm drawn to you, but because you've made me want to be a better person. I don't know where this is headed, but I want to find out with you." Emily looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw something in him that mirrored the feelings she had inside. She had been afraid to trust someone like him, someone who lived in a world so different from her own. But now, sitting across from him, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, she knew that this wasn't about their worlds or backgrounds. It was about two people who had found something real in each other. She smiled softly, squeezing his hand in return. "I want that too, Jackson," she said, her voice steady with newfound certainty. "I want to see where this takes us." The moment hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Jackson leaned in, his lips brushing against her forehead in a soft, tender kiss. It wasn't passionate or intense, but it was meaningful, a promise of what was to come. As they pulled away, Jackson smiled, the weight of the conversation lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, Emily," he said quietly, "for giving me the chance to show you who I really am." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn, that she would find someone who made her feel this way, safe, seen, and cared for. As she left his apartment that night, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to embrace it, to let herself trust in the possibility of something real. The days that followed felt like a dream to Emily. She had never imagined that something so unexpected, so unlikely, could develop into what she now shared with Jackson. Every moment they spent together felt more meaningful than the last, and the uncertainty she had once felt about their connection was slowly being replaced with something more powerful: trust. Their relationship wasn't perfect. It couldn't be, especially not when they came from such different worlds. But it was real, and that was enough for both of them. One Sunday afternoon, as Emily was enjoying a rare day off from work, she received a message from Jackson. "I'm hosting a small gathering at my place tonight. I'd love for you to come. It's just a few friends, nothing fancy. Will you join me?" Emily was taken aback. They had spent most of their time alone together, and the idea of meeting his friends made her nervous. What if they didn't accept her? What if she felt out of place? But as she read the message again, she realized it wasn't just about meeting his friends. It was about taking the next step in their relationship, about allowing themselves to grow even closer. She typed a quick response, agreeing to come. That evening, Emily arrived at Jackson's apartment, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, but she did want to look nice. As she walked up to his front door, she took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. When Jackson opened the door, his face lit up, and he immediately pulled her into a warm embrace. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice full of admiration. Emily smiled, feeling a little more at ease in his arms. "Thanks, Jackson. I'm a little nervous, though," she admitted. Jackson chuckled softly. "Don't be. These are just friends of mine, and they're going to love you. Trust me." As they entered the apartment, Emily was introduced to several of Jackson's closest friends. They were all friendly and welcoming, making her feel more comfortable with each passing minute. Jackson's world, the world of the elite, was intimidating at first, but these people weren't what she expected. They were kind, down to earth, and genuinely interested in getting to know her. Throughout the evening, Emily found herself laughing and chatting with people she never would have imagined she'd connect with. And the best part was that Jackson was always by her side, making sure she felt included and comfortable. There was a moment later in the evening when they were standing by the balcony, watching the city lights below. Jackson turned to her, a soft smile on his face. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. "I know this world is different from yours, but I want you to feel like you belong. You mean a lot to me, Emily." Emily's heart swelled at his words. She had never imagined that someone like him, someone so powerful and successful, would want her in his life. But as they stood there, together in the glow of the city, she realized that none of it mattered. What mattered was how they made each other feel, the trust they had built, and the connection that seemed to grow stronger every day. "I'm glad I'm here too," Emily said, her voice soft but sincere. "I feel like I'm finally starting to find my place in all of this, in your world, in my life." Jackson leaned in slightly, his forehead gently resting against hers. "I'm happy you're here," he whispered, "and I want to keep making sure you feel like you belong, no matter what." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't just an outsider looking in. She was part of something real, something that didn't have to be defined by wealth or status. It was about two people finding their way together, regardless of the challenges that might lie ahead. As the night came to an end, Emily realized just how far she had come since that first chance meeting with Jackson. She had walked into his world with hesitation and doubt, unsure of what to expect. Now, standing next to him, she understood that their connection was something worth fighting for, something worth embracing. And no matter what happened next, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. It had been a month since Emily had entered Jackson's world, and things between them seemed to be evolving in ways neither of them had expected. The initial spark that had ignited between them had grown into something deeper, something more grounded. It wasn't just about the attraction anymore. It was about understanding each other, sharing vulnerabilities, and navigating the complexities of their different worlds. Emily had found herself becoming more comfortable in Jackson's world, even though it still intimidated her at times. The people he interacted with, the expectations, the glitz and glamour of his lifestyle, they were all still a far cry from the quiet, modest life she had known. But Jackson was there by her side, reassuring her that she didn't have to change for anyone, that she was enough just as she was. One evening, Jackson invited Emily to join him for a special event. It was a charity gala, one that he attended every year, but this time, he asked her to be his date. Emily hesitated at first. She wasn't sure if she was ready for such a public event, especially one that would place her right in the spotlight of the world Jackson moved in. But Jackson's warm, Smile and steady gaze gave her the courage she needed. "You'll be with me the whole time," he assured her. "We'll face it together." The night of the gala, Emily stood before the full-length mirror in her apartment, adjusting the dress she had carefully chosen. It was elegant, simple, yet stunning, and it felt right. She looked at herself and wondered how she had gotten here. How a girl from a small neighborhood in the city had found herself preparing for a gala with one of New York's most influential men. But as she looked at her reflection, she realized she wasn't just there because of Jackson's success. She was there because she had something to offer, something of her own. She was her own person, and Jackson had made her feel like she mattered, like her voice and her story were worth hearing. When she arrived at the venue, Jackson was already waiting for her outside. As soon as he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "You look incredible," he said, his voice full of admiration. Emily couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth spread through her. "Thank you," she replied, taking his hand as they entered the building together. The gala was everything Emily had expected, elegant, sophisticated, and filled with people who exuded power and wealth. But as they moved through the crowd, Jackson remained by her side, making sure she felt at ease. They spoke with guests, laughed at jokes, and shared quiet moments when the noise of the room became overwhelming. Emily had always feared she would feel out of place in such an environment, but with Jackson, it was different. He made her feel like she belonged, like her presence was as valuable as anyone else's. As the evening wore on, Jackson took her aside to the balcony, where they could get a moment of quiet away from the crowd. The city lights sparkled below, casting a beautiful glow over everything. Jackson turned to Emily, his expression soft but serious. "I know this life isn't easy for you," he said. "I see the way you handle things, the way you navigate everything around you. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Emily felt her heart swell at his words. "It's just that sometimes I feel like I don't belong here," she admitted. "Like I'm just a part of this world by accident." Jackson gently took her hand, looking into her eyes with a depth that spoke volumes. "You belong with me, Emily," he said quietly. "You belong because you are you. That's all that matters." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache with emotion. She had never imagined someone like Jackson, someone with so much power, could speak to her with such vulnerability and tenderness. She had always thought that wealth and status meant everything, but Jackson had shown her that it was the connection between people that truly mattered. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know where this is going, Jackson, but I'm not afraid anymore." Jackson smiled, pulling her closer to him as the night sky stretched above them. "Neither am I," he whispered. "Wherever this goes, we'll face it together." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and conversation, but Emily couldn't stop thinking about what Jackson had said. In that moment, she knew that she had found something worth fighting for. They were building something real, something that wasn't based on wealth or expectations, but on trust, respect, and a shared understanding of who they were. And no matter what the future held, Emily knew that she and Jackson would face it together. The following weeks passed by in a blur of quiet moments and significant milestones. Emily found herself settling into her new reality with Jackson, embracing the complexities of their relationship while continuing to learn about his world and her place in it. She had never imagined that someone like him, so powerful and driven, could make her feel like she truly belonged. But that was the beauty of what they had found together. No matter the differences between their lives, they had created a space for each other. One afternoon, Jackson invited Emily to a small, private gathering he was hosting at his apartment. It was a casual event, with close friends and colleagues, but the idea of mingling in that circle still made Emily nervous. It wasn't that she didn't want to be there. It was the fear of feeling out of place again, surrounded by people who lived in a world so far removed from hers. But Jackson reassured her as always. "You're with me, Emily. You belong here," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Besides, these people are just friends. There's nothing to worry about." As they arrived, Emily was surprised to find that the people at the gathering weren't as intimidating as she had imagined. They were warm, welcoming, and genuinely interested in getting to know her. Jackson's friends were nothing like the cold, distant figures she had often imagined in the world of the rich and powerful. They were real, down-to-earth people who treated her with respect. Still, There were moments when Emily felt like an outsider, especially when discussions veered into topics she didn't understand, business ventures, high-end investments, and industry talk that seemed so foreign to her. Jackson noticed her discomfort and immediately moved to her side, gently steering the conversation in a direction that made her feel included. "Emily's an artist," he said proudly, his eyes lighting up as he introduced her to a few more people. "She's got a unique perspective on the world." Emily couldn't help but smile at the way he spoke about her. She had never expected him to take so much pride in her, in what she did. It was as if he saw her for who she truly was, beyond the label of girlfriend or plus one. As the night went on, the awkwardness began to fade. Emily found herself engaged in a conversation about photography with one of Jackson's colleagues, who shared her passion for the art. They laughed, exchanged ideas, and for the first time that evening, Emily felt like she wasn't just an outsider. She was part of the conversation, part of the group. When the event began winding down, Jackson took her hand and led her outside to the balcony. The night air was cool, and the city lights below sparkled like a sea of stars. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said softly, his voice filled with warmth. Emily leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her. "I'm glad I came too," she replied. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if I really fit in here, in your world. It's so different from mine." Jackson gently turned her to face him, his expression serious but tender. "You don't have to fit in, Emily. Not in the way you think," he said, his voice unwavering. "You belong because of who you are. You've brought something into my life that I didn't even know I needed. You don't have to change anything about yourself for this to work. Just be you." Emily's heart swelled at his words. For the first time, she understood that it wasn't about fitting into his world. It was about creating a new world together, one where both of their realities could coexist. "I want to be with you, Jackson," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "I don't care about the world around us. I care about us." Jackson smiled, his eyes reflecting the same certainty she felt inside. "Then that's all that matters," he whispered. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the silence between them speak volumes. The city stretched out before them, but in that moment, it felt like nothing else existed, just the two of them, connected in a way that was more real than anything either of them had ever experienced. As they made their way back inside, Emily realized that she had found something truly special with Jackson. It wasn't just about love, it was about understanding, support, and a deep sense of partnership. Whatever challenges they might face in the future, she knew that together, they could overcome anything. And for the first time, Emily was certain that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following their heart-to-heart conversation on the balcony seemed to pass in a blur. Emily and Jackson's bond only deepened as they continued to share more of their lives with each other. There were still moments of doubt that crept into Emily's mind, questions about their future, about whether their relationship could withstand the pressures of their very different worlds. But each time, Jackson reassured her. His consistent support, his constant belief in her, slowly started to quiet the insecurities that had once consumed her. One afternoon, Jackson took Emily to one of his favorite spots in the city, a small park tucked away from the usual chaos of New York. It was a place he visited when he needed to think, to clear his mind. They sat together on a bench, surrounded by trees that provided a peaceful escape from the busy streets just a few blocks away. Emily felt a sense of calm wash over her as she leaned into him, letting the silence between them settle comfortably. "You know," Jackson began after a while, his voice thoughtful, "I've spent so many years building my career, trying to be the best at what I do, that I forgot what it felt like to be at peace." Emily turned to look at him, noticing the subtle exhaustion in his eyes. "I think I understand," she replied softly. "When you're constantly working to prove yourself, it can be hard to just be." Jackson nodded, his fingers lightly brushing against hers. "Exactly. But then you came into my life, and everything shifted. You've made me realize that there's more to life than just success. It's about the people you share it with. It's about the connections you build, the moments you cherish." Emily smiled, touched by his words. She had always believed that the people around her were what truly mattered, her friends, her family, and now, she was starting to see the truth in Jackson's words. Their relationship had never been about what they could offer each other in terms of wealth or status. It was about something deeper. It was about understanding, trust, and love. "I'm glad I came into your life, Jackson," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "I've learned so much from you, about what it means to take a step back and appreciate what you have right in front of you. I think I've spent too much time focusing on the past, on what I don't have, instead of what's right here." Jackson turned to her, his expression softening. "You're one of the most incredible people I've ever met, Emily. You've shown me that there's so much more to life than just pushing forward all the time. I think we both needed this, each other." There was a brief pause as they sat there, just taking in the moment. The sounds of the city faded into the background as they shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. It wasn't about the big gestures or grand displays. It was about the small, everyday moments that brought them closer together. As they stood up to leave, Jackson pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I don't know what the future holds, Emily," he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "But I know that I want you in it. I want to see where this goes, together." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She had never imagined that she could feel this secure, this certain about anything, let alone a relationship that had begun with so much uncertainty. "I feel the same way," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know where we're headed either, but I know I want to be with you, every step of the way." They walked hand in hand through the park, the warm sun setting behind them, casting a golden glow over everything. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace with the path she was on. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that as long as they faced them together, they would be okay. Jackson had shown her that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, really living, and cherishing the moments that mattered. As the evening drew to a close, Emily couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had found something she never thought possible, a love that wasn't based on appearances, on wealth, or on expectations, but on genuine connection. And for the first time in her life, Emily truly believed that this was where she was meant to be. As the weeks passed, Emily and Jackson's relationship continued to grow stronger, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. They had found a rhythm, a balance between their different worlds, and every day seemed to bring them closer. Emily had become more comfortable in Jackson's circle, and Jackson, in turn, had started to let down the walls he had spent years building. They had learned to navigate the complexities of their lives, and despite the challenges that came with their differences, they both knew they had something real. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and responsibilities, Jackson invited Emily over to his apartment. He had planned a quiet night in, away from the public eye, and he wanted to spend it with her. Emily, always appreciative of their peaceful moments together, agreed eagerly. When she arrived, Jackson was waiting for her at the door with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You look incredible," he said, pulling her into a gentle hug. Emily smiled, feeling warmth spread through her as she relaxed into his embrace. "Thank you," she said softly. "You look pretty great yourself." The night was simple. They cooked dinner together, laughing as they tried to get the recipe right, and then curled up on the couch to watch a movie. It was an ordinary evening by all accounts, but to Emily, it was perfect. She had come to realize that it wasn't the grand gestures or lavish events that made her happiest. It was these quiet, intimate moments with Jackson that she cherished the most. As the movie ended, they sat in comfortable silence, the dim light from the TV casting shadows across the room. Jackson turned to her, his expression serious but soft. "I've been thinking about something," he began, his voice low. Emily glanced at him, her curiosity piqued. "What's on your mind?" Jackson hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I know we've been moving fast, and I don't want to rush things, but I feel like we're building something really special here. And I want you to know that I'm all in. I'm ready for whatever comes next." His words left Emily speechless for a moment. She had always known that Jackson was committed to their relationship, but hearing him express it so openly, so sincerely, made her heart swell with emotion. She took his hand in hers, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice steady but filled with feeling. "I never imagined I'd find something like this. I didn't think I'd find someone who makes me feel so complete." Jackson smiled, a look of pure affection in his eyes. "I never imagined it either," he admitted. "But I know that I don't want to let it go." Emily leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder as they both sat there, savoring the quiet connection they shared. For the first time in her life, Emily felt completely at peace with where she was. She had found someone who understood her, who accepted her for all that she was, and who made her feel like she was enough. Jackson had shown her that it wasn't about fitting into a certain mold or living up to others' expectations. It was about being with someone who loved her for the person she was, flaws and all. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to their future. They spoke about their hopes, their dreams, and the possibilities that lay ahead. Jackson spoke of his ambitions, but this time, there was a new clarity in his voice, a sense that whatever the future held, he wanted to face it with Emily by his side. Emily, too, had started to think about the future differently. She had always been focused on surviving, on getting by, but now she was starting to think about what she truly wanted in life. She wanted to continue building her career, yes, but she also wanted a life filled with love, connection, and moments like these, moments of quiet happiness shared with someone who truly cared. As the night came to a close, Jackson walked Emily to the door. "Thank you for tonight," she said, looking up at him with gratitude in her eyes. "I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world." Jackson smiled, his hand gently cupping her face. "No," he said softly, "I'm the lucky one." And in that moment, Emily realized that their relationship was something extraordinary. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real, and that was all that mattered. They had found something worth fighting for, something worth building together. And as Emily stepped out into the cool night air, she knew in her heart that this was just the beginning of something truly beautiful. As the months went by, Emily and Jackson found themselves in a rhythm that felt comfortable yet exciting. The doubts and uncertainties that had once clouded Emily's mind were slowly fading, replaced by a growing sense of security and understanding. They were no longer two people from different worlds trying to figure out how to coexist. They were partners, building something real, something that was uniquely theirs. One Sunday afternoon, Jackson surprised Emily with an invitation to take a weekend trip to a small vineyard in upstate New York. It was a place he had visited years ago, a retreat away from the noise of the city, and he wanted to share it with her. Emily, always open to new experiences, eagerly accepted. The drive to the vineyard was peaceful, the landscape gradually shifting from the bustling city to the serene, rolling hills of the countryside. As they arrived, Emily couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place. The vineyard stretched out before them, with rows of grapevines bathed in golden sunlight. The air was fresh, the kind of crisp, clean air that only the countryside could offer. Jackson led her to a cozy cabin where they would stay for the weekend, and as they settled in, Emily felt a sense of calm that she hadn't realized she was missing. The next day, they spent the afternoon walking through the vineyard, enjoying the quiet of the land. Jackson showed her the different grape varieties, explaining the process of winemaking with the kind of passion that only someone who truly loved it could have. Emily listened intently, fascinated by the beauty of the process, the care and attention that went into creating something so special. "It's like life," Jackson said as they walked, his voice thoughtful. "It takes time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But when it's done right, it's worth it." Emily nodded, her heart swelling at the simplicity and truth in his words. She had never thought about life that way, but in that moment, she understood. They were both working towards something, together. They weren't perfect, no one was, but they were building something that felt worth the effort. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the cabin, the sun dipping below the horizon, Jackson turned to her. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We've come a long way, Emily, and I want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never doubted Jackson's feelings, but hearing him say it out loud, in such a raw and honest way, made her heart swell with emotion. "You mean the world to me too, Jackson," she replied softly. "You've made me feel more than I ever thought possible. I don't know where we're headed, but I know I want to do it with you." Jackson reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know I've made mistakes in the past," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "But with you, Emily, I feel like I'm finally getting it right." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She had never imagined she would find someone who understood her so completely, who saw her for who she really was and loved her anyway. They sat there for a long time, not saying anything, just enjoying the quiet of the evening, the peace of being together. As the weekend came to a close and they headed back to the city, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had never expected this kind of love, this kind of connection. And yet, here it was, right in front of her, with someone who truly cared about her. Jackson had shown her that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about the small things, the quiet moments, the shared understanding, and the willingness to build something meaningful day by day. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to face it with Jackson by her side. Whatever came next, they would face it together.